the opportunity to get association of His Grace Navadvip Chandra Prabhu. So Prabhuji very kindly giving the association to devotees here in Srinagar, Mayapur. Also Prabhuji is teaching in Mayapur Institute Bhakti Vaibhav. So I've heard Prabhu's lectures in Mayapur TV. It's really very inspiring. So I got the contact with the help of His Grace Rashmani and Prabhuji. So Prabhuji very mercifully agreed to give us association. So I'll just give a little, introduction of Prabhuji, as Prabhuji had very exalted, introduction, of course. So His Grace Navadvip Chandra Prabhu, very dear disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. Prabhuji completed his academic studies from Oxford University, and after that Prabhuji did his career in engineering. Maybe some of you would be from engineering background. So then Prabhuji joined ISKCON in London only, in Bhaktivedanta Manor. And from since 2012, Prabhuji is serving in different capacity in ISKCON, specifically teaching Shastras. So Prabhuji had been engaged in teaching Shastras, specifically taking up Bhakti Vaibhav courses for many years. And also in Mayapur Institute, Prabhuji is teaching. So we are very fortunate today to have with us His Grace Navadvip Chandra Prabhu. So we like to welcome Prabhuji by chanting Hare Krishna mantra. All of you could unmute yourself and kindly unmute your video also. So please chant the holy name once. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama.
So the topic is lessons from the life of Sripada Ramanujacharya. Over to you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nitai Chandra Nimai Prabhu. And it is very nice to see all of you. Well, to see most of you, but to have all of you on this call. And this is the ISKCON Youth Forum based in Mayapur, is it, Prabhuji?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. Oh, very nice. And how many years has this been going, this particular group?
Yeah, this group is active from maybe from project 2010. Yeah.
Okay. So quite a long time. Must be some very experienced devotees here.
Yeah, like Krishna Prabhu is also from youth from preaching, and some more brahmacharis. So yeah, they're in Mayapur. So like that.
Right. Very nice. So today is the disappearance of Sri Ramanujacharya. And Sri Ramanujacharya is a very important personality in our tradition. He did something which is inconceivable, but essential, an essential step in re-establishing the path of bhakti. If you cast your time back to before Sri Ramanujacharya, we of course had the appearance of Sri Shankaracharya. Sri Shankaracharya came after a certain philosophy had already been well established. So if you cast your minds further back from Sri Shankaracharya, you will come across the rise of Buddhism. And of course, prior to that, there is no real definable event as such, but our basic Sanatana Dharma, Hindu traditions in general were being conducted in different ways, in different paths, within the different sampradayas. So what happened when Lord Buddha came was that he established a certain philosophy of complete voidism. It is basically considered atheistic philosophy. And he rejected the Vedas. Now, prior to that, the different Brahmanas and other members of the tradition had started to become more corrupt. And many misbehaviors were rampant, in the form of animal killing and so forth. So you can see actually through the ages, there is a certain rise and fall of different philosophical sentiments or different philosophical emphasis. So Lord Buddha came, and one way to rectify it was that he preached the principle of ahimsa. But he also rejected the Vedas. Now, although we accept Lord Buddha as one of the incarnations of the Supreme Lord, this is not an incarnation that we take instructions from simply because he rejected the Vedas. So although we respect him as a manifestation of the Lord's potency, this is not someone that we follow or take instructions from. Many people externally are confused or they see similarities between our path and Buddhism. And many are attracted by Buddhism with its principles of atheism, basically. The idea that there is no God, but there is a principle of reincarnation. But ahimsa is there, non-violence. Now, unfortunately today, although Buddha himself established ahimsa, many Buddhists themselves do not practice ahimsa. I went to Bodh Gaya a couple of years ago, where Lord Buddha sat and meditated, and he attained his salvation there. He attained nirvana, right? He attained his liberation. And then I was speaking to some of the different practitioners there, the different Buddhists there, and many Buddhists come from all parts of the world to Bodh Gaya. You will see Chinese people come, Chinese tourists come, people from Japan, people from all around this region who are practicing Buddhism. And they come to pay their respects at the place where Lord Buddha achieved his nirvana. But then when you speak to them, you realize that they don't actually follow some of the principles of ahimsa even. They may eat meat without discrimination. And some of the other items are always being modified a little according to time. So this was the situation around Lord Buddha's appearance. Now, after that, obviously, you can see that once the Vedas have been removed from the picture, we have a problem. Because the Vedas are meant for taking us to the Supreme Lord. So that situation cannot remain forever in society. If there is a desire to take people once again back to their constitutional positions. So therefore then Sri Shankaracharya appears, and we understand he has the empowered potency of Lord Shiva. And he came and he preached a philosophy which is called Advaitavad, Advaita, which means non-dual. Everything is one. He established the authority of the Vedas again. But the conclusion was not quite the complete conclusion. The conclusion was that the Lord and the living entities and material nature all is the same. There is no difference. The living entity only considers himself to be the living entity because of Maya. But ultimately, he is the Supreme Lord. And there is no difference. So you see how there is a certain progression of thought now. From completely degraded Vedic behavior by those who are supposed to be protecting it, mostly the Brahmanas and others, you then have Lord Buddha who rejects the Vedas completely. Then you have Sri Shankara who re-establishes the Vedas but gives an explanation which is closer to Buddhism, right? Because the Buddhist philosophy is voidism, nothing is there. So this Advaita is very simple, but there is a person, there is the Lord, but he's considered impersonal. So this is the history prior to Sri Ramanujacharya. And then approximately at the turn of the turn of the millennium, around the 10th century or so, there is some disputes actually, historically speaking, in terms of Ramanuja's exact histories, detailed dates, and like that. But it is within that sort of period. So in today's talk, we won't focus too much on the historical events, but we will focus more on the key events and the messages and lessons that we learn from them. If anyone wants to, of course, there are many, you can do as much research as you like in the history of Sri Ramanujacharya. He is an important acharya, so it is his upbringing, his behavior, all of that is very inspiring. Well, Sri Ramanujacharya appeared in a place called Sriperumbudur. How many of you know where that is? Okay. Sriperumbudur is near Chennai, not so far from Chennai. I visited there very recently, actually. It is approximately halfway between Chennai and Kanchipur. And in Sriperumbudur, Sri Ramanujacharya appeared and he was raised. And the overwhelming philosophy at that time was the philosophy of Shankaracharya, this Advaita philosophy of impersonalism. Yet somehow, from an early age, Sri Ramanujacharya always had great attraction for the devotees. And there was one devotee who would often pass by his house called Kanchipurna. This Kanchipurna lived in a certain village called Unamili. I'm not sure what the modern name for this village is, but he would travel to Kanchipur and he would pass by Ramanuja's house. And Ramanuja would try to serve him in some ways. Now, by birth, this particular devotee was not of a high caste. He was of a lowish caste, you can say. And therefore, there would be some taboo associated with Ramanujacharya, who himself appeared in a high family, associating with someone like this. But Ramanujacharya did not care about any of this. And he simply accepted that this is a pure devotee of the Lord. And therefore, he's worthy of my respect and worship. So from a young age, he had a great affection for this personality. This personality would then later on play an important role in Sri Ramanujacharya's life. There are actually different persons who are involved in Ramanujacharya's life, and we will try to name the 3 or 4 important persons. So Ramanujacharya, he grew up, he spent his childhood there in Sriperumbudur, and then his parents got him married. And they married him to one girl who was of a smarta background, sort of very rigid with rules and regulations, processes, etc. And then after some time, his father passed away. So Ramanuja stayed there for a little while, and then he decided to move to Kanchipur. Because in Kanchipur, there was, obviously, it is a great city of many temples. And of course, if you've been to Kanchipur, you have to take darshan of Lord Varadaraj. Absolutely amazing darshan you will get of Lord Varadaraj. He's very beautiful, very large deity also, very merciful. And this Kanchipurna was a great associate of Varadaraj, a great devotee, you can say, of Varadaraj. Now, in this place, Kanchipur, was also a school run by a foremost scholar called Yadav Prakash. Now, Yadav Prakash was of the Shankara sect. He was of that teaching, but he was an expert He was the best scholar, the best teacher of those times. And so our Ramanujacharya enrolled in his school and studied under him Sanskrit grammar and the Vedas, Vedanta. But of course, he was hearing always a Advaita philosophy, a philosophy of monism, a philosophy of illusion, Mayavad, what we will call Mayavad, basically. And there were a couple of incidents where, although he was very respectful to his teacher and he heard very patient and he was an expert student also, there were a few occasions when he challenged his teacher or disagreed with him on a couple of points relating to descriptions of the Lord. So these incidents happened once or twice. There are more elaborate descriptions of them. But Ramanujacharya was somehow, from his very birth, he was a devotee of the Lord. And he could not stand it to hear things like, the Lord is illusion, he is simply energy, he has no form. Rather, he wanted to hear things like the eyes of the Lord are beautiful like lotus petals. He wanted to hear these personal descriptions. And after a few such occasions where Ramanuja challenged his teacher, eventually his teacher and the students around started to consider him a threat to the Shankara philosophy. Someone is in ecstasy? Okay.
Sorry, Prabhuji.
That's okay. So he was started, because he was very potent in his explanation. It was difficult for them to defeat them. And so they started to see him as a threat. And obviously their role was to protect Adi Shankara's philosophy. Their role was to protect that philosophy. And they felt they were doing Shankaracharya a great service by protecting impersonalism. So eventually it got to such a stage where they actually hatched a plot to kill him. This is how serious it became. And so, on the pretext of a pilgrimage, his guru Yadav Prakash invited him to go to Prayag. And, many people go to Prayag to bathe in the confluence of the rivers there. He invited him to go to Prayag. And so he was practically forced, actually. Practically, when the guru gives you a very direct order or instruction, you should come with us. You cannot really say no. It's difficult in that circumstance. So he went. Now his cousin, he had a cousin called Govinda. And Govinda, when he also came, and along the ways, he kind of uncovered, through discussion with his other disciples of Yadav Prakash, he uncovered that there was this plot to kill him. The idea was basically that he would drown in this confluence and it would be seen as an accident or something. Just think to what extent people go over a philosophical variation. And so he heard about this and he advised him immediately just to run away from that spot. So he did. Ramanujacharya basically just ran. It was night. He basically ran as fast as he could, ran away. The disciples and Yadav Prakash looked for him. They couldn't find him anywhere. And they thought, okay, he must have perished somewhere. In one sense, our wish is fulfilled. That's what they felt. Now he somehow started wandering, trying to head back towards Kanchipur. And there's a whole pastime, a mystical story which takes place, whereby this couple came towards him at one point, a hunter couple, hunters. They came towards him and they asked him for some water, and they showed him a well, and he went down to collect some water and to offer it to them. He did this on 3 occasions. And then on the 4th occasion, when he came back out of the well, they had disappeared. And he found himself transported to the outskirts of Kanchipur. Completely mystical situation. And later on it was revealed to him that, yes, Kanchipurna or other associates, that this couple was actually Lakshmi Narayan who had come. And therefore this water from this well should be used to bathe Lord Bharataraj. So somehow he came back to Kanchipur. And then after some time, Yadav Prakash and all of his students came back and they saw him sitting there quite comfortably. And they were a little terrified because they realized if we had better stop this, because if anyone ever finds out, we are in big trouble. So actually, Yadav Prakash requested him to again enroll in his school and to become a student. And Ramanuja did so actually. He did so with the intention that he would show mercy later to this personality. So just see some of the steps that a disciple takes, a serious practitioner of the Lord takes, sometimes putting their own safety in danger, just to be true to the parampara and true to the mission of the Lord. So then really these studies continued. And there are many, many personalities that were involved in Sri Ramanujacharya's life. Now we know of one great person called Yamunacharya. Now Yamunacharya was in some way related to Ramanujacharya because his mother's brother was a disciple of Ramanujacharya. Okay, so not really a direct family relationship, but his mother's brother was a disciple of Yamunacharya. And so Yamunacharya had seen this child at a young age. And while Ramanujacharya, of course I should say we are using the term Ramanujacharya because that is his name, but initially that was not his name. His name was Lakshman. His name was given to him as Lakshman. And his name Ramanujacharya came later, much later, when he started accepting disciples and when he took sannyas. That came later. But we'll just continue using that name so it doesn't confuse the whole story. So while he was in Kanchi, Ramanujacharya, his philosophy, his preaching, his fame started to grow. You know, the devotees started to hear that here is a great devotee in this place of Kanchi. And specifically Yamunacharya, who would reside in Sri Rangam, Rangakshetra. This is a place where Lord Chaitanya visited also. This place, Sri Rangam, is where he used to reside. And he heard of the growing fame of Ramanujacharya. He came to Kanchipur also, But he didn't, he was observing actually. He was observing Ramanujacharya and he was impressed. And he felt that, yes, here is a person who will actually take forward this mission of devotion to the Lord. So there was a nice little pastime which took place where he went back to Sri Rangam and then he sent one of his disciples, right? He sent his disciple called Purnacharya to Kanchipur. And he was meant to recite a poem that Yamunacharya had composed before the Lord, before Lord Bharataraj. Very devotional poem, stotra. And when Ramanuja heard this, he was very, very impressed and he wanted to meet Yamunacharya. So he said to this disciple, and his name is Mahapurna, Purnacharya, sometimes the two terms are used interchangeably. He said, I would like to meet this. Can we go to Sri Rangam and meet him? And so he agreed. And soon after they left, traveled to Sri Rangam. It's not clear whether they left immediately or after some days or whatever, but they went to Sri Rangam. On the way to Sri Rangam, however, they received news that Yamunacharya is in a very critical condition and he's about to pass away. So you can imagine when they heard this news how devastating it was. And so they ran, basically. They went as quickly as they could to Sri Rangam. But by the time they reached Sri Rangam, it was already too late. Acharya had actually left. But something interesting happened. He was lying there with his disciples, and his hands were in special positions. His left hand, I mean, on the screen, I don't know, this might look like my right hand, just I think the image is flipped. It's actually my left hand. He had the thumb and forefinger clenched and the three fingers outstretched. It's called the peace mudra, something like that, right? That was his left hand, Yamunacharya's left hand, while he was lying there. His right hand was clenched into a fist. Very interesting sight that Ramanuja saw. When Ramanuja came there and he saw this, he spoke in the presence of all of those persons. And he said, our Guru wants to tell us three things. The first thing was that I will follow the Sri Vaishnava path and accept the samskars, and I will teach people devotional service to the Supreme Lord and save them from this Mayavad philosophy. He made this declaration there. As soon as he did this, one of the Guru's fingers extended. From the clenched fist, one of the fingers extended. Then he made his second declaration. He said, I will prepare a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra called the Sri Bhasya, which will be in authorized parampara. Because every bona fide sampradaya or line needs to have commentary. And that Sri Sampradaya did not have that commentary at that time. And when he said this, the second of the three fingers extended. You can imagine what a mystical scene this all is. The disciples have seen him for the first time. Yet he is, disciples of Yamunacharya have seen Ramanujacharya for the first time, many of them. And yet here is someone who's able to have such an intimate relationship with the Guru despite having not directly interacted with him in a substantial way. His last declaration was that he would compile a dictionary based on Parasar Muni's teachings, which in a former era, Parasar Muni, father of Srila Vyasadeva, had established the difference between the living entities and the Supreme Lord, or the relationship between the living entities and the Supreme Lord. So you see why this is so essential for defeating Mayavad philosophy? Because with Mayavad, there is no difference between the Supreme Lord and the living entities. So even if we say there is a difference, if we cannot explain that difference and ultimately come to the point of sambandha, what is our relationship with the Supreme Lord, even theoretically understanding the difference means nothing. So these were Ramanuja's three statements, and then the third finger opened. Everyone accepted that this is a very, very powerful person who will take forward the mission of our spiritual master, Sri Yamunacharya. Many different incidents happened. Ramanujacharya stayed in Kanchi for some time. And there he wanted to take initiation properly from a bona fide person. And as I mentioned to you, he had great affection and reverence for Kanchipurna from a young age. He actually wanted to take initiation from him. But he said to him, can you please advise me the process by which one accepts a guru in this world? And Kanchipurna understood and said, I will ask Lord Varadaraj. I will ask the Lord what he has to say on this. Then after some time, he came back with an answer. And he said, you should take initiation from Mahapurna. You should take initiation from Mahapurna. Accept the samskars from him. Mahapurna, there were certain prominent disciples. These different disciples, Kanchipurna, Mahapurna, Goshtipurna, there's a couple of others, but these are the three we'll focus on today. So, excuse me. So Ramanujacharya started the journey again from Kanchi to Sri Rangam. Have any of you been to Kanchipur or Sri Rangam on this screen? You have, Prabhuji? That's nice. Well, I don't know, depending on which route you take, but there is a place called Madurantanam. It's about 40 kilometers from, well, it's about 40 kilometers from Kanchipur, roughly. You can check exact places. As he was walking, he passed through this place, and there somehow he actually happened to meet the person he was aspiring to take a picture from. And they were both very happy to meet, actually. And this is a very old temple. When I went there a few weeks ago, it was undergoing renovation. The was being redone. It will be done for a few months, they told us. So the deities are in this little temporary arrangement. Very nice deities, and the pujaris were very nice, also sincere. Businessmen keeping everywhere. I was impressed with the description of the stories he was telling us. He accepted Mahapurna as a spiritual master. Now one day, I'm cutting the story short because I want to focus more on the actual lessons. Someone is saying the voice is not clear. Is it clear? Is it okay for everyone?
Sometimes breaking.
Sometimes breaking. Okay.
No,
Nothing. We'll just, if it gets worse, I can switch off my camera. Maybe that will improve it from my end. So this was one very powerful temple of Yamunacharya. Now there was another disciple, as I mentioned, called Goshtipur. And Mahapurna had said to Ramanujacharya that you should approach Goshtipurna because he's very expert in the art of mantras. And you should learn mantras from him. So he did this. But 18 times he requested.
Hare Krishna Prabhus. So, kindly wait, Prabhu will be back again very soon. Hare Krishna.
Okay, was that mine or yours?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare
Yes,
Krishna.
Prabhu.
Here?
Yes, Prabhu. We are able to hear.
Okay. Did the meeting break or did just my connection break?
Meeting is okay, Prabhu. Just maybe some connection.
Meeting is okay.
Complete. Yeah. From your end, yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm just checking. So 18 times he was refused. And on the 19th time, he finally agreed. And he took him into confidence and received these mantras from Goshtipurna. Confidential mantras with their explanations and their purports. And Goshtipurna also advised him, don't disclose these to anyone. Because this mantra is meant to be kept secret. So, are we still okay? You can hear?
Yes, Prabhu. Sure.
Yes, okay. Okay, I'll keep checking every now and then.
Sometimes
Sometimes
it's breaking. Sometimes it's breaking. Little bit.
sometimes it
That's
okay. Okay, we'll carry on. And so Ramanujacharya was very happy with these mantras now. What Ramanujacharya had many followers. In fact, 4 persons were considered disciples at this point. Not officially initiated, but a disciple basically means someone who follows the teacher. So in our tradition today in ISKCON, we only consider a disciple once they have formally accepted shelter or initiation. But anyone who is studying under someone else is considered a disciple in the traditional sense. So we already had 70. Correct.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay.
Maybe
So what he did,
yes, Prabhuji. No.
I'll just continue, and if it cuts out, we'll just have to see what happens. So he collected all his disciples and initiated them by loudly chanting these mantras. Now, if you remember, his Guru Goshtipurna had specifically told him not to disclose them to anyone. So when he heard about this, he was very disturbed. And he said, "You will surely go to hell." At this point, Sri Ramanuja said, if this fallen person has to go to hell in order to save all so many other souls from the clutches of Maya, it is well worth it. That was his vision. What a great soul. What a great soul Sri Ramanujacharya is. His guru was so happy to hear this, actually. Goshtipurna was so ultimately happy to hear this that he even asked his own son to take initiation from him. So we can see sometimes how there can be a certain set of events, pastimes with powerful acharyas, which ultimately lead to a very satisfactory conclusion. So we're getting a sense of his great power and philosophical strength. And so there are certain lessons that we can actually appreciate from his life. There are many other stories. There's a story of Quraysh and others. I won't tell those. I'm not sure we have time for that. But really, if you want to do a study, you can spend literally hours reading and studying about Sri Ramanujacharya. Some of the authorized information that we have about him comes from a book by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. There's a lot of confusing information in other different places. So just be careful. There are some historical discrepancies, some actual philosophical discrepancies. So I've been taking this book as the most authoritative source, really, by Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. And in which he describes the different acharyas of the sampradayas. And so we can see, just from a few examples that I've given so far, Ramanujacharya, he stood for very important principle of completely rejecting Mayavad philosophy. There was no room for him to accept that the Supreme Lord has no form. He wanted a Supreme Lord that he could serve and love. And he was willing to have his life tested in order to do that. There were a number of other challenges to his life later by this king of the Cholas, Krimikrant also. He challenged him to a debate, and then basically when he lost and his disciple Quraysh failed to surrender to him, plucked his eyes out, it all became a whole drama. But there were a number of occasions like this that happened to Ramanujacharya. He was frequently challenged, but somehow, even in Sri Rangam, they tried to poison him later when he took residence there. Pujaris even tried to poison him, and they hatched a plot. Somehow the Lord protected him. just like he protected Sri Prahlad Maharaj from all the misbehavior of others. And so this strong refutal of Mayavad philosophy is a tenet of his. He also demonstrated the great need to respect Vaishnavas. Yasya yal lakshanam proktam. We know this verse, Pumso varna bhivyanjakam. Yad anyatrapi drishyeta tattanaiva vinirdishet. That this is from Narad Muni, I believe, and he says that if one displays the symptoms of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, one should be accepted as such, regardless of which family he has been born in. So this is really quite but this verse itself is from the Bhagavatam. And the 7th canto is from the Bhagavatam itself. But Sri Ramanujacharya very much put it into practice. He was not interested in smarta tendencies. He was interested in pure devotional service. So whether that pure devotional service was demonstrated by a low-born Shudra or by someone from another arrangement, he simply did not care. Now those persons themselves would also conduct themselves very humbly. They're not like the people of today. If someone is born in a lower situation, in the modern world, they declare themselves boldly, we have just as much right to the Supreme Lord. Why don't you let us do this or this? In those times, these great devotees would simply adopt the humble position, just like Haridas Thakur. And they said, yes, I'm low-born, I'm a very sinful person. In my past, I've committed many sinful activities, and therefore I'm receiving this situation that causes me trouble in this life. That was their mood. If someone has that mood, they become dear to the Lord eventually. Not if they start declaring their rights. Look, it says in the scripture that a person born in a low-grade family, if he accepts the worship of the Lord, is equivalent to the top-grade Brahmana. This may be true from a tattva point of view. It has absolutely nothing to do with developing our state of humility. So we can learn that from the people that Ramanujacharya interacted with also. He was so humble. The first person that Ramanujacharya met, Kanchipurna, he was so humble that he would say, oh, no, we should observe the etiquette properly, and I cannot initiate you as you are requesting because there's a difference there in our statuses. If we accept, there's a sensitivity there in a cultural tradition, and we respect that tradition also. Don't forget, we do not follow the line of Adi Shankara or Buddha specifically, who rejected the Vedas. We don't. Throughout the Vedas, Lord Krishna has established the Brahmanas as the topmost and worthy of worship. So if we start propagating any philosophy which diminishes that, it is a disservice to the Vedas. But the genuine devotees know, and there are countless verses along the lines of the one I've just spoken, that a Vaishnava is superior to any of the other orders. And by their behavior, a Vaishnava is naturally humble. So the Vaishnava conducts himself in a certain way, and the Lord reciprocates with that. So this is the second point of the need to respect Vaishnavas. According to one's symptoms, we should deal accordingly with a person. We should never mistreat anyone, especially a devotee of the Lord, because then our access to the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is cut off. If we mistreat a devotee of the Lord, no chance Krishna will be pleased with us. Not a chance. We have to give up such behavior. He demonstrated compassion for others. He was willing to, go out of his way to help others see the path of Krishna Bhakti. And also we learn from Ramanuja's life the behavior of some of his disciples like Kuresh, others like Govinda, who assisted him and were willing to take danger on behalf of him. This is actually the duty of a disciple. The spiritual master is in any danger, the disciple tries to take that danger. And this is just a subtle point just to keep in mind. Generally, there is no need for the disciple to put himself in that position. But if the need arises, the disciple should be willing. Therefore, Ramanuja's disciples demonstrated this. So Sri Ramanuja's philosophy is called Vishishta Advaita. If you consider the progression I've spoken about, from misbehaving Brahmanas to Adi Shankara who rejected the Vedas, to Buddha who rejected the Vedas, then to Adi Shankara who re-established the importance of the Vedas but presented a monist, impersonal philosophy. Now you have Sri Ramanujacharya who presents also a form of Advaita, non-dual, no difference. But this is Vishishta Advaita. It is non-duality with a difference, in which the living entity is considered a part and parcel of the Lord, of the same kind, as we say, the same quality, but is not the same as the Lord. So this is the Vishishta Advaita of Sri Ramanujacharya. Now, subsequent to this, there are other schools and other developments which take place. There's the Dvaita, Advaitavad, there's the Shuddha Advaita of Madhvacharya. Then even there's, of course, ultimately it goes to our Achintya Bheda, Sri Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But then also Vallabhacharya's philosophy has its certain name. That's the Shuddha Advaita philosophy. You can see there's a progression. It takes time for populations and viewpoints to change. And so terminologies and changes have to be introduced gradually. But what Ramanuja spoke is basically the same as our Achintya Bheda Bheda. Simultaneous oneness and difference. Just in Ramanuja's philosophy, there is increased emphasis on the oneness aspect, simply because that was the historical background he was in. But he was one person who helped to re-establish firmly the path of bhakti, which had basically become lost. You cannot do bhakti with an impersonal concept, or if you reject the Vedas. It's not possible. Bhakti is between a person and the Lord. So these are some thoughts, some details of Ramanujacharya. I won't cover any more details on that. Philosophy is extensive. You could spend hours on it. But he is a very, very key pillar. If you get a chance, you can visit the places where he was prominently involved. Sri Perambudur, Kanchipur, Sri Rangam. His body is actually preserved in Sri Rangam. His actual body is there. They preserved it with different herbs and things, and you can take darshan of that. So one day, sometime in the future, if you get a chance to go to Rangakshetra, try that. Lord Chaitanya spent 4 months there during the rainy season at the house of Venkatabhata. That house you can also see, now used by someone else, but opposite that, it is a mud temple. And there are some original deities there which are carved by Lord Chaitanya. Jagannath Subhadra deities. It is said that they were carved by Lord Chaitanya himself. So here are some highlights on Ramanujacharya. If we try to follow some of his precepts and teachings and become strict in our spiritual lives and not at all affected by Mayavad tendencies or philosophies, we will actually do very well in our bhakti. Are there any questions from anyone?
Ishtadev Gopal.
Hare Krishna, thank you for the wonderful class. Am I audible, Prabhu?
Yes.
Yeah. Prabhu, as you mentioned, like Sripada Ramanujacharya, he was very outright in his rejection of Mayavad. And as we also see Srila Prabhupada adopting the same mode, like repeatedly in his purports, whenever he gets opportunity, he's speaking against Mayavadi. So, like, what I wanted to ask is, like, when in our attempts to share Krishna consciousness, like when we are visiting some universities or some colleges, so we meet some professors or principals who are actually stinted with this. I mean, those who follow this Mayavadi philosophy, and they speak many times against. Like bhakti and other things. So then how should we react? Because they are in a superior position and we are much smaller in age also, and and we have gone to their college to share and Krishna consciousness, to invite their students or some events like that. So then how should we respond to that?
You have to deal with it very carefully. It is best not to enter into an argument with someone like that, especially if they're of substantially senior to you in age, if they're a professor or something like that. But amongst others who may be of a similar age to you, you can also mention that, yes, this Advaitavad philosophy is mentioned in the Vedas. It was propounded by Sri Shankaracharya. But it is one of the many doctrines available within our theistic concept. The personal doctrine is also has been very strongly established by Sri Ramanujacharya, Sri Madhvacharya, even Sri Vallabhacharya, by Lord Chaitanya, Nimbarka. In each of the four sampradayas, there is personal worship of the Lord described. In the Rudra Sampradaya, it is not impersonal, it is personal worship of the Lord. And it is very clearly said that one needs to receive a mantra from one of the four bona fide sampradayas in order for that mantra to be effective. So these are also truths that you can present as being shastric truths and realities. Not necessarily to the senior person who is completely caught up with that. You may not change him anyway. Nothing much happens. After a certain age, you just get set in your ways and you're not interested. Things may change, but especially if you then need that person's help for facilitating programs, it may be better not to cause too much trouble. Better to focus on your audience, the people who are coming, and give them a strong, but also be respectful to Shankaracharya. So we offer our pranams to Sri Shankaracharya, which we do. And we in our minds can just remember that he said at the end, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, worship Govinda. So for us, there's no contradiction in offering him our pranams.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Any other questions?
Pradeep Mandal, Prabhu, yes, go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Anavad Pranam. Can you please elaborate in short that what is the difference between Visishta Advaitavad and Achintya Vedavet?
Yes. It is quite difficult to define it precisely. And in fact, some of these terms have been assigned by scholars. They're not necessarily to be found explicitly written like that in the original texts. These have been done through different analysis later. With Ramanuja's Vishishta Advaita, there is a greater emphasis on the oneness aspect. Then other versions like Vallabhacharya, Madhvacharya, they have a more direct difference, dualism, pure dualism. The living entity is never the Supreme Lord. And then Lord Chaitanya's Achintya Bheda Bheda, it's all within that oneness and different school. All of these things can be counted within that one school, but specifically when Mahaprabhu took different elements from the different sampradayas, before that, you could say each of the different presentations of the philosophies were incomplete in some way. They placed incomplete emphasis on their particular presentation. But this was necessary in order to build that evolution of thought. But then Lord Chaitanya made it complete and he gave the full explanation. Yes, the living entity is considered like part and parcel, but it is also Ekala Ishvara Krishna Arasa Vibritya. There is one Supreme Lord, everyone else is eternal servant. And Maya can never touch the Lord. And so it's just a more concrete formulation with less emphasis on the oneness. The oneness is there for us in terms of quality. With Ramanuja, it was a little bit of a fudge, actually. Fudge, if you know the word fudge, he kind of mixed it up a bit. He said it is all oneness because that is what people wanted to hear. But he said it's oneness with a special case. Vishishta means something special. Which, of course, if you look at it carefully, it's a contradiction, right? If it's oneness, how can there be something special there? But he had to use that trick to bring people gradually to appreciating that there is a difference between the living entity. And the living entity is meant to serve the Lord, not meant to see himself as the Lord. Whereas in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy, it is explicitly clear. The living entity will never be the Lord. He is only meant for his service, like a spark of the fire. But in terms of quality, he's the same, just different in quantity. So yes, the distinction isn't so clearly definable, but you can see how within the scope of identifying different stages of evolution, we have assigned different terms, or the scholars have assigned different terms. But they're all heading towards the complete philosophy given by Lord Chaitanya, which is with the worship of Radha and Krishna established as the foremost. Yes, anyone else? Maybe you have time for one more question.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, as we see that Sripada Ramanujacharya had this great vigor to take all the living entities back to Vaikuntha. Like, so we see in different acharyas the same type of mood, like Srila Prabhupada also had the same mood. As we know, Lilamrita says that how Srila Prabhupada sent one letter to Rajendra Prasad that I want to take all the living entities back home. Back to God. So, like for us also, we should follow the acharyas, but sometimes we are not able to break the comfort zone, like so that we could serve in like following the footsteps of acharyas. So, what are the things devotees like us we should do so that we could also follow in their footsteps, to bring the holy name, bring Krishna consciousness to more and more souls in the world?
Yes, well, lethargy is one item, laziness, lethargy or comfort zone, as you said, that would prevent us necessarily being very strong in this area. But also we can become philosophically strong, because it is not just the acharyas, but it is also the personalities in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Prahlad Maharaj mentions very nicely. It says, Monam charanti vijanena parartha nishta. Naitan vihaya kripanan vimumuksha ekonanyam twadasya sharanam brahmaton pashya. He says that there are so many rishis and yogis who take vows of silence, monavrat, and they go to the Himalayas or wherever, and they only care about themselves. But Prahlad Maharaj says, I do not wish to be like these, considering only myself and my own perfection. He says, I'm happy to stay here because I know that these people will be happy when I take them to the shelter of your lotus feet. Therefore, he requests the Lord, please let me continue to render this service. That type of compassion will also develop. We can just see it that can be encouraged the more we read about persons like this. And there's one great way to be out of the comfort zone, it is to experience discomfort, which the material world often gives us anyway, without invitation. In Prahlad Maharaj's case, he was constantly given that by his tyrannical father. Discomfort, pain, suffering. So when that happens, we can try and use it as an impetus. And then also, if we display a little enthusiasm, it will affect others around us. And similarly, if we see that someone is very enthusiastic to propagate the mission at their own expense, we can be inspired and we can actually offer them our pranams. Because then one day Krishna will empower us. And so we can get, from multiple ways, we can get philosophically inspired, because these are not things invented by our acharyas. They are fundamental components of the behavior of a devotee. We can use that philosophical strength, and we can use the example of the contemporary devotees to help us also. Just look at all the sannyasis who are preaching in such difficult circumstances. There are many, many great persons who've done so much. Just impossible to calculate what they have done for this movement. And we know that this movement is so desperately needed. That's some
Thank
kind
you
of
so much,
answer.
Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhuji. Very much
Thank
helpful.
you. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. I will.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. His Grace Navadvip Chandra. Prabhuji is so nicely elaborated in a short, like all the very, very important aspects of Sripada Ramanujacharya's life. And it's really very much inspiring to hear from Prabhuji. So all of us, we are really very indebted that Prabhuji gave us 1 hour from his most busy schedule. So we are really thankful to Prabhuji. So like to chant the holy name, Hare Krishna Mantra loudly. So all of you kindly open up your videos, even like at least those who are not done so far, I can open up their videos. Yeah, I chant the whole way. Hare Krishna, Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.